Another assassination attempt, another attempt on the life of President Trump just 50 some odd days before Election Day. And who's to blame for it? Well, if you ask the media, Donald Trump was asking for it. But we're going to show you the evidence to prove that it's the media, along with Democrats, who are riling up would-be assassins in this country. And we've got all the proof you need coming up in just a moment. Plus, J.D. Vance takes on the media single-handedly yesterday across multiple networks, and it wasn't even close. And was that debate rigged between ABC News and the Kamala Harris campaign? There's growing evidence to suggest, yes, in fact, it was. We're going to get to all of that coming up right now. I'm tanned. I'm rested. I'm ready. I'm Larry O'Connor. You can call me Larry. That was a long vacation. It was only 2 weeks, but it felt like an eternity because look at everything that's happened in the last couple of weeks. Although, if you've been following the channel, you know that I did chime in from my vacation on the debate for a day, and a lot of you really reacted to that video. Thank you for that. And if you're just joining us for the first time because we haven't live streamed over my vacation, thanks for joining us. Please like and subscribe this video. It helps other people see it, and it also helps you know when we do go live. And I promise you, we'll be going live every single day right up through the election. Well, except for Fridays. We're not live on Fridays. You know what? I don't want to get lost in the details. Let's get right to it. Yesterday, yet another assassination attempt on the life of President Donald Trump, the former president of the United States and the leading contender to win the election just 2 months from now. The second assassination attempt in as many months. And if you want to know what's wrong in this country, if you want to know why this is happening, well, you've come to the right place. We want to start with your American news media. Take a look at just a sampling of headlines covering this story, starting with the Washington Post. Do you see something weird about that headline? FBI investigating Trump golf course episode as a potential assassination attempt. And the graphic, the picture is of the back nine here? That's the front nine, I guess, technically speaking. But was this from the sports pages? God. By the way, if you ever wonder about how the media coordinates with themselves, how they're all navel-gazing and looking at each other and copying off their notes of the person in the class right next to them, doing that whole thing to figure out how they should answer the next question, take a look at this, because that's the Washington Post. Here's the New York Times. Trump unharmed after shots fired at Florida course. What is the obsession with the golf course? Why is that the main focus of this headline? They only have a certain number of words they can use in the headline to deliver an impactful message. Why waste time on the golf course? Yeah, that's part of the who, what, where, and when. It's the where part, and you can address it in the first couple of paragraphs. But the headline? How about Trump, victim of another assassination attempt as left-wing rhetoric goes unchecked? That's a good headline. Convey the message without having to worry about the golf course aspect of it. Here's NBC News. Man in custody after Trump golf club incident. Was once convicted of possessing a machine gun. So the man in custody is not a potential presidential assassin. He's just a guy with a gun charge. And he was arrested, not in an assassination attempt, but he was arrested at a golf club incident. That makes it sound like he tried to hit him with a sand wedge. Golf club incident? These people are awful. They're vile. But that was Washington Post, New York Times, NBC News. How about a fourth one? This is TC Palm. I don't know what newspaper. Oh, that's Reuters. Reuters. Trump safe after gunfight near Florida golf club. Again, it has to be all about the golf club. He was out golfing again, I guess, is the underlying message here. Gunfight? A gunfight? Like Wyatt Earp was involved here? It didn't end there. Politico, the next day, this morning, they decided that the real focus here was on Republicans' anger. Republicans outraged over possible assassination attempt. Quote, they're going to keep trying to kill Trump. Republicans outraged. This is a fascinating angle on the story, Politico. I guess actually there's some validity to this because it appears no one political is outraged over this, or anyone writing for any of the newspapers or working for any of the cable news stations. All that unity and harmony that we kept hearing about, the new way forward. Let's turn the page. Let's go together and leave all the vitriolic divisiveness in the past. Yeah, you'd think that if people really were trying to believe all that stuff we've just heard from the Kamala Harris Democrat Party, echoed in the media for the last couple of months, that maybe they too would be outraged that a lone gunman is trying to put a bullet in the head of a leading presidential candidate, thus upending our democratic process to select the leader of this constitutional republic. But they're not upset about that. No, it's Republicans who are outraged. And the focus of our story is going to be Republicans' outrage. Not about, the attempt to assassinate Donald Trump. But we're just getting started. Time chimed in today because we're learning quite a bit about this dirtbag who tried to kill Donald Trump yesterday. Fascinatingly, we've already learned more about him in the last 24 hours that we've learned about the last dirtbag that tried to do this 2 months ago. We know nothing about him, which is a story in and of itself if any one of these news outlets would care to focus on it. But here's time. The suspect arrested in relation to the shooting at Trump's golf course. But I love the language here. Not the suspect arrested trying to shoot Donald Trump at the golf course, or I guess there's still not evidence that he shot his gun. So how about the suspect arrested pointing an AK-47 in the direction of Donald Trump? That would be accurate. No, he was just arrested in relation to the shooting at Trump's golf course. Again, the golf course has to be a big part of the story. Has been identified as, I'm not going to say his name because he doesn't deserve it, a 58-year-old with unclear political ideology, a criminal record, and a history of praising Iran and supporting Ukraine. Well, praising Iran and supporting Ukraine sort of gives you a little bit of clarity on his political ideology. Although, listen, I get it. Supporting Ukraine can go either way. But to say that he's a supporter of Ukraine is sort of understating the case. This guy is a Ukraine fanatic. This guy is a Ukraine enthusiast. This guy actually went, according to his own accounts, to Ukraine to fight himself and to recruit other people to fight with him, which, by the way, if an American citizen is going overseas to go fight with a foreign army against a foreign adversary, you're going to be on the radar of some people within our national security and intelligence apparatus. I think it's incumbent on the people in our federal government who have had some interaction or knowledge of this guy. It's incumbent on them to put it all out there right now. And the fact that they haven't yet is disconcerting. But he has an unclear political ideology. He's been donating to one political party for the last several years exclusively. And when one looks at his pickup truck, and that's all you got to do is look at his pickup truck, you'll see a fascinating little clue on the back of it in the form of that bumper sticker. Bumper sticker that says Biden Harris. But, he has an unclear political ideology. He's an enthusiastic supporter of the Ukraine war effort. He's got a Biden Harris bumper sticker. I guess he could be Bill Kristol or Liz Cheney or Adam Kinzinger. But either way, he doesn't have an unclear political ideology. The fact that they're saying it's unclear tells you that they don't like the answer to the question. The latest development this morning, according to CNN, is apparently he has been charged with 2 counts related to the gun. 2 counts, including possession of a firearm while a convicted felon and possession of a firearm with an obliterated serial number, which I guess puts him right up there with Hunter Biden when it comes to violating federal law. Now, this is not to say that there won't be further charges pending, the ones related to trying to kill Donald Trump. But as of now, he's being held on 2 gun charges. And I, for one, As a lover of the Second Amendment, I am thrilled to see that finally somebody is enforcing all of these laws that Democrats scream about and force down our throats on a regular basis. Because if this happened in New York City or Washington, D.C. or Chicago, they never press charges on gun-related crimes. All right. That's what we know about this suspect, although there's a little bit more on him, and we'll share it with you coming up in a minute. But what about the media's reaction to this? I told you, beyond just the headlines that we saw on how they're obsessively focusing on the golf course, they're also talking about the very heated and ugly political rhetoric that obviously brought a man to try to eliminate Donald Trump from the face of the earth. Let's face it. We've been hearing pretty horrible political rhetoric day after day after day, even in light of the last assassination attempt 2 months ago, that Donald Trump is an existential threat to our democratic process, to our constitutional republic, that he must be stopped. If he's elected, it will be the last free election we have in this country, and that he's a national security threat. He's an international security threat. He has to be stopped. So finally, we've got some people in the media saying enough is enough. Here's MSNBC saying in no uncertain terms that this violent, outrageous political rhetoric must end.
Yeah. Do you expect there to be calls from within the Trump campaign to do that? Because he's going to reach out to his supporters and say, let's take this down. We do not know, again, the source of any gunshot or gunshots. We don't know who's responsible for this. The whole thing has yet to be 100% confirmed from start to finish how this all played out. But do you expect to hear anything from the Trump campaign about toning down the rhetoric, toning?
Are you kidding me? No, seriously, are you kidding me? I'm so sorry. MSNBC's concerns about the heated political rhetoric apparently are focused in just one direction, the Trump campaign. Now will the Trump campaign tone down the heated political rhetoric? Finally, what's it going to take? A bullet in this man's brain for him finally to shut up over there? MSNBC basically saying that Trump was asking for it. What do you expect? You keep riling up our left-wing assassins. At some point, you're going to have to pay the price, says MSNBC. MSNBC is basically saying that Donald Trump is like, you know, the loose woman wearing the miniskirt and the blouse cut down to here who's frolicking around in a bar and acting kind of slutty. I mean, listen, what do you expect is going to happen? She kind of had it coming. That's what MSNBC is saying here. Do you think they'll finally tone down their rhetoric? They keep angering people. No, they keep angering you. They keep angering MSNBC. I mean, MSNBC wants the Trump campaign to tone down the political rhetoric because it's reached the point now for a second assassination attempt. Let's take a look at the kind of political rhetoric going on MSNBC. This was just, what, a month ago on Jen Psaki's show?
And it is just unquestionable at this point that that man cannot see public office again. He is not only unfit, he is destructive to our democracy, and he has to be eliminated.
He has to be eliminated. Not he has to be defeated. Not we have to win in a landslide. Not we have to get more votes in the electoral college process so that he isn't elected president. No. No, that's for amateurs. He has to be eliminated. Dan Goldman, a sitting congressman, Democrat from New York, he has to be eliminated.
Our democracy, and he has to be eliminated.
And why again, Dan Goldman, does he have to be eliminated?
Office again. He is not only unfit, he is destructive to our democracy, and he has to be.
Yeah, you know the rest of it. He has to be eliminated. He's unfit. He's a threat to our democracy. he has to be eliminated. But MSNBC is concerned about the rhetoric coming out of the Trump campaign because he's just going to bring on more violence to himself. I mean, what are you going to do? Oh, Larry, that was a month ago. It was MSNBC. That's a one-off, right? Okay, you're right. You know what? Let's check in on MSNBC one more time. In fact, to be fair and compare apples to apples, let's check MSNBC versus MSNBC. Let's check Jen Psaki show to Jen Psaki show, and let's check that clip from Representative Goldman a month ago. Let's check it compared to, I don't know, let's say yesterday. In fact, let's check Jen Psaki's show on MSNBC yesterday, literally hours before the assassination attempt.
Springfield is going through hell, but they're going through hell because the guy that says that he wants to be the commander in chief is actually bringing that hell to their footsteps. He decided to amplify a lie on a national debate stage, and that is harming American citizens. That is a problem. When I talk about MAGA, I talk about the fact that when we swore in finally in January, that we swore to defend against those that are coming against us, whether they are domestic or international. And right now, I feel like MAGA in general, they are threats to us domestically. And we see it time and time again. Listen, the problem isn't the people coming in. The problem is this guy and his people here that are doing the bomb threats throughout our country. Domestic terrorism is a real thing, and he is the guy that stokes it.
I just want to make sure you saw what you just saw. That it soaks in, that you actually comprehend everything that this woman, Jasmine Crockett, another sitting Democrat in the House of Representatives, just said. Because, well, I want to hand it to her. At least she doesn't lie like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden and just focus on Donald Trump as being the threat. No. She goes further. She says it's not just him. It's him and his followers, his supporters, his voters, MAGA, as she calls it. You're domestic terrorists. You're the domestic threat to our Constitution that has to be stopped. This is the threat that we swear in to protect the Constitution from. All enemies, foreign and domestic, she referenced there. Well, you're a domestic enemy. And she specifically used the word MAGA, not Trump, MAGA. Trump voters, Trump supporters, at the moment, roughly 50% of this country. You got that, right? Real fast?
That we swore to defend against those that are coming against us, whether they are domestic or international. And right now, I feel like MAGA in general, they are threats to us domestically.
MAGA in general. You're voting for him, so you are a domestic threat. That was on MSNBC. That was hours before the assassination attempt unfolded. And MSNBC, then after the assassination attempt, wondered out loud whether Donald Trump would tone down his rhetoric because he's stirring the country up. It's funny, though. His rhetoric isn't inspiring any violence directed toward any political opponents of his or any Democrats. Not that I would wish it to, of course, but maybe his rhetoric isn't like their rhetoric. Maybe Donald Trump's political rhetoric, as much as you don't like it, is not actually inspiring anyone to violence and hasn't inspired anybody to violence. Maybe the real problem here is on the left. Maybe they're projecting a little bit. Just maybe. Oh, but you know what? I know what you're saying. That's MSNBC. Come on, that's a one-off. Those guys are crazy. That's a fever swamp. That's not happening anywhere else. Okay, let's check in on CNN, shall we? And they got their own Democrat member of the House of Representatives. Boy, the House is really full of some great Democrats there when it comes to blaming the victim of an assassination attempt. Okay, CNN, take it away. Who's to blame here?
I'm sure you saw this. The Palm Beach County Sheriff said the protection around former President Trump was limited because he is not a sitting president. Do you think that needs to change?
I do. Again, this is the second assassination attempt, so I think we need to put more resources towards this. But I think we also have to address some underlying issues that are going on here as well. This really seems to be the confluence of two very bad very bad things going on in the Republican Party. On one side, the attempts to divide, to enrage the population, to put out false rumors and misinformation. We know the mayor in Springfield is begging the Republican Party to stop with the false information on immigrants. They have portions of the town on lockdown at this point, and an increase in all of the partisanship and the fear mongering that's going on. And then on the other side, we have this complete availability of assault rifle.
Yeah, it's guns and political rhetoric. I'll spare you the diatribe about assault weapons. Let me just fast forward to the part where Jim Acosta jumps in and says, "Excuse me, Congresswoman, I'm sorry, I understand the point you're trying to make here, but there is literally zero evidence that this assassination attempt and the suspect that they have in custody right now was in any way motivated by what you just cited, having to do with Springfield, Ohio, and the issue of the Haitian immigrants there. Literally, there's nothing. One has nothing to do with the other, but you're saying now that Republicans talking about Springfield, Ohio in some way is related to this assassination attempt. Do you have any evidence to suggest that the two are related?" Let's play that clip. Oh, that never happened. I'm sorry, Jim Acosta didn't do that at all. Jim Acosta just sat there furrowing his brow, looking very concerned about what the Congresswoman said, and will make that ridiculous connection. See, the reason why this guy, who is a huge Ukraine enthusiast, who wanted to make sure that Donald Trump was stopped because he's a threat to the international order, because Ukraine apparently is the, I don't know, epicenter of the international order. There's no evidence of that, but this woman, this Congresswoman, wants to make sure that everybody watching CNN connects those dots, because we can't talk about what really is going on here. Well, listen, I understand you're next. I love jumping ahead and knowing exactly what you're thinking. It's like, all right, MSNBC, sure. Okay, fine, CNN. But that's just cable news. Like, I mean, that kind of thing, that blaming Trump for his own assassination attempt, that would never, ever work on network news, right? That's just for the cable news fever swamp. You know where I'm going, right? NBC News last night with Mr. Forehead, Lester Holt.
Today's apparent assassination attempt comes amid increasingly fierce rhetoric on the campaign trail itself. Mr. Trump, his running mate J.D. Vance continue to make baseless claims.
I mean, honestly, Did you see that beautiful transition? They spend, 30 seconds on the assassination, and listen to his transition language.
Today's apparent assassination attempt comes amid increasingly fierce rhetoric on the campaign trail itself. Mr. Trump, his running mate J.D. Vance continue to make baseless claims about.
So the assassination attempt comes amid increasing rhetoric on the campaign trail, and then he immediately goes to Springfield, Ohio, and what they consider to be baseless claims. Because really, he had it coming. He was asking for it. He got what he deserved. That's the message from the left-wing media. That's the message from Democrats. You just saw them. You just saw them say it out of their own mouths. And no condemnation anywhere from anyone, certainly not from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. They put out written statements claiming that they were relieved that Donald Trump was safe, which you got to question. I mean, honestly, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have spent the last, 7 years telling us that Donald Trump is the most dangerous man in America, that he will ruin our country, that he is this side of Mussolini and Hitler. And he not only will upend our nation, but also upend the entire world if he were elected. So if you really believe that, honestly, why are you relieved that he's safe? I think that's a question worth asking. Either they're using all that rhetoric about him and they don't really believe it, but they're just saying it because they don't have any policy initiatives that they can promote positively. So they just have to tear down their political opponent as the next fascist coming down the lane to ruin your lives and ruin the world. Or they really do believe that, and they're lying about being relieved that he's safe. Because if you really think Donald Trump is that guy, I mean, isn't it logical that, listen, maybe you don't want him dead, but you're relieved that he's unharmed? Relieved? Really? Okay. I mean, listen, I have more respect for Democrats who come right out and say what they think about Donald Trump, like this woman, Rachel Vindman. Last name sound familiar? Yeah, that's right. She's married to Alexander Vindman, the so-called whistleblower who brought about the Ukraine phone call impeachment process against Donald Trump. She took to the X platform immediately and made a really super funny joke, guys. No ears were harmed. Carry on with your Sunday afternoon. Of course, the two people who were seriously wounded in the July 13th assassination attempt, not to mention Corey Compratori's family, who lost their husband and father in that assassination attempt. He was murdered that day. They probably don't think this was funny because that was about a lot more than just an ear being harmed, ma'am. But since no ear was harmed, you can go ahead and carry on. This is what we call in the humor business a twofer. See, you can make fun of both assassination attempts at the same time. That's Rachel Vindman. Not only is she the wife of Alexander Vindman, but she's also the sister-in-law of Eugene Vindman, who's running for Congress in Virginia. I'd love to show you Eugene Vindman's condemnation of his sister-in-law. It would have been really easy. I love my sister-in-law. She's a part of my family, but I disagree with and disavow her making light of an assassination attempt of the Republican nominee for President Donald Trump. Now, I'd love to show you that tweet, but I can't because he never said that. No, the only thing we got was, eventually Rachel Vindman deleting her tweet. Here was her explanation today. It sat out there almost a full day. She said, I've deleted my tweet. Well, bully for you, Rach. It was flippant, and political violence is a serious issue, whether it's aimed at a former president, the media, immigrants, or political enemies, and every incident should be addressed appropriately if we want to change the tenor of our political discourse. Wow, well crafted by your PR people. But it's funny, this took a day for her to put out there. In the meantime, her husband went on the offensive and actually claimed that he was, in fact, the victim, that he and his wife were the victim. Here's what he tweeted out when everyone was screaming about what his wife had said. He said, my family's been the target of politically motivated harassment, intimidation, and retaliation, which may or may not be true. But you know what's missing from that list of things that his family's been the target of? An assassination. So, sorry, Alex, but you're not allowed to compare the two. It ended my and Eugene Vindman's military careers. Trump should be disqualified from office just based on his harassment and incitement of violence. See, it's Trump the one who's inciting violence. At the same time, his wife is making fun of the violence that Trump just had to endure. Are you getting it? Do you see how it is when you're on the left? And I can't tell you enough about who Alexander Vindman is, because it didn't end with his whistleblowing and promoting of the impeachment process against Donald Trump. No, here's the video he just put out. This was included in the Democrat National Convention last month for Kamala Harris. Here's Alex Vindman.
As a soldier, my duty was to uphold my oath to the Constitution, to support and defend it against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I worked for Trump as part of his national security team. I reported Trump's corruption because it was my duty to protect this nation, and Trump was putting our country at great risk. Donald Trump is a danger to our national security.
Do you understand the picture I'm painting for you here? Do you understand and recognize the commonality of language being used? These are mainstream Democrats. That video played at the convention on television during the convention. That's Alexander Vindman, whose brother is running for Congress, using the same language that Jasmine Crockett, a current sitting member of Congress, used. A domestic threat, an enemy of the country, a national security threat. What do you think's going to happen if y'all keep saying the same thing over and over and over again? And I can't emphasize enough that the Vindman family, well, they're running as a unit in this congressional race. There's both brothers. What a pair they are. With Eric Swalwell during the campaign. They're running as a team, man. It's Team Vindman. And let me take this quick moment to tell you that this guy, Eugene Vindman, and his brother and sister-in-law, who you just saw there, celebrating in some sort of blood orgy, the excitement that they couldn't contain themselves in, over the assassination attempt of Donald Trump. This guy's running in Virginia's 7th congressional district. He's running against a retired Green Beret from the Army, Special Forces dude. His name is Derek Anderson. Right now, the race is a toss-up, neck and neck. This would be a great time if you wanted to throw a buck or two to Derek Anderson. That's the 7th congressional district in Virginia. All of the things that we're hoping to achieve on election night coming up in a little over 50 days, one of the great victories would be to see the Vindman family humiliated, just completely 100% humiliated and taken out of the national political conversation once and for all. That'd be great. Derek Anderson running in Virginia 7. Meanwhile, let's just check in on CNN one last time, because everyone's searching for clues. We'll never really know what this guy's motive was. Although, wait a minute. What was the one thing that the Vindman brothers and the wife, Rachel Vindman, that whole thread that we just had, what's their biggest issue? Ukraine, right? Right? Let's go back to these guys again. They're all about Ukraine. And this would-be assassin, what was his number one issue that he was on Capitol Hill lobbying for and trying to get funding for and meeting big-time celebrities and congressmen about and actually traveling to Europe to fight on behalf? Ukraine. Ukraine. I mean, really does make you wonder why the Vindmans were so front and center on this whole thing, trying to make fun of it and downplay it and equivocate over it. I mean, you want to connect dots here. Maybe Ukraine has a lot more to do with this than Haiti does. But I'm not a professional journalist. Let's go back to the experts over at CNN.
I really, I don't care what you feel about him or Harris. I mean, this is the expectation that he will be safe, and the reason why this is, in some ways, you said how close the election is. The problem is this is a safety issue that is being thrown into a very intense political environment in which the very fact of an assassination, a constitutional moment, because it could have impacted voters, will be used for political purposes, and that to me is just exceptionally unfortunate, because whatever your beliefs are, we do deserve to have campaigns that are not where violence isn't being used as either a sword or a shield.
Wow. I mean, that should go in the Hall of Fame, that one. She started out so strong there, making the case against political violence and how this is an assault on the Constitution. And maybe it's me. This is why we want a Secret Service to be able to protect our candidates, because one lone assassin's bullet shouldn't disrupt our entire way of life and our constitutional process. We, the people, should have the right to vote for the person that we want to vote for coming up in November. That's why it's not good when the Colorado State Supreme Court decides to step in and try to take somebody off the ballot. And it's not right when a prosecutor in Manhattan or a special prosecutor in Washington, D.C. tries to throw that candidate in jail before the election. You see, we should have the right to vote and let the voters decide what's going to happen here. So it looked like she was walking down that path, right? This sort of thing is terrible. It's terrible for our Constitution and our democratic process. But no, it has nothing to do with disrupting the election and taking a candidate out and removing that person from consideration. No, her real fear here is that it's going to be used for sympathy for Donald Trump. You picked that up, right? The real concern here is that this will impact voters. And voters might feel sorry for Donald Trump, and that would be terrible. But don't we deserve a better news media than this? Please tell me we do. They continue to shock me. But there are very serious questions now that need to be asked, that deserve to be asked, that I hope will be asked about our Secret Service. And let me just throw a couple of them out there. You're seeing a lot of analysts jump in front of cameras or write lengthy think pieces in their journals of choice and push them out on social media so that everybody can stare at their navels and be really circumspect about where things have headed with the Secret Service and how this is terrible for our system, that we, the people, can't know for sure that our political candidates are being properly protected. And I'd like to just sort of throw the yellow flag on that one for a moment, because from my perspective, as a voter, as a citizen, and as a commentator and observer of all of this, I'm not seeing the Secret Service having trouble protecting our political candidates. I'm seeing our Secret Service having trouble protecting one of our political candidates. I don't think the question in front of us right now is what's wrong with the Secret Service? Why can't our candidates for president be protected? I think the question is what's wrong with the Secret Service when Donald Trump can't be protected? The former question on why our candidates can't be properly protected would be appropriate if we saw this kind of near success of an assassination attempt on both sides, on all sides, but we're not. It's just Donald Trump. And once again, this breach had to do with the perimeter surrounding the former president. I mean, have you asked yourself about 2 months ago? How many times have you asked yourself about how fortunate it was for that assassinator, would-be assassin? How fortunate it was for that would-be assassin that he picked the one building to climb up on that didn't have any surveillance. He picked the one building that was outside the perimeter and also didn't have anybody monitoring it. He picked the one building where he couldn't be seen. Was he that smart? Was he really? Of course, he's dead now. We'll never know. And have you also asked yourself how this guy also got within the perimeter of Donald Trump when he was randomly golfing unannounced and not scheduled at the Trump International Golf Club in West Palm Beach? Nobody really knew about this. Well, I mean, except for people within Donald Trump's inner circle and the people who were assigned to protect him. As our friend over at Libs of TikTok points out, the golf outing was a last-minute decision. It was a last-minute decision that wasn't publicized. It wasn't put out there. It wasn't on anyone's schedule. Nobody knew about it except for that very, very tight circle and the Secret Service. So how did this guy even know to be there? Also, last we checked, he was living in Hawaii. How did he get from Hawaii to Florida, acquire an AK-47, set up his little protective barrier with his ceramic tiles put into a reusable shopping bag, which, by the way, is the perfect evidence that this guy is a lefty, so that he could be in that position to even do this? I sure hope we get the answers to those questions. But there's certainly questions that need to be answered, at the very least, because the one thing our CNN commentators said was 100% true. The reason why we have a Secret Service is to keep madmen like this from disrupting our process to select our leaders. And now, twice in 2 months, we've come way too close to tragedy. And I fear it's just the beginning. There's no doubt that these are crazy times that we're living in, right? And I'm glad we've got each other. I wish we had some more peace of mind every single day. Peace of mind for security for our country, security for our leaders, security for our families. Think about this. You're not financially secure if all your eggs are in one basket, right? And financial security is pretty important these days. So I want you to think about gold and silver for a second. Gold and silver are actually an excellent way to diversify your savings. They're a hedge against inflation. They're a physical asset, not just paper money. not just some ethereal thing that you own digitally. They're physical, they're tangible. You can hold them. It's gold and silver. And they're in high demand right now, globally. From the wealthy to central banks, read about it. They're all acquiring gold and silver. Now, through my friends at Birch Gold Group, you don't have to be a central bank and you don't have to be a rich gazillionaire. You too can own physical gold and silver in a tax-sheltered retirement account. Yeah, you can diversify an old IRA or 401k for no money out of pocket into an IRA in gold and silver. It's one thing you can do to secure your family savings. So I want you to text my name, Larry, to 989898. What's going to happen is you get a free, no obligation info kit. You're going to learn the role precious metals can play in your overall saving strategies. Again, that's Larry. Text Larry. There's no obligation here. Okay. All you do is text my name, Larry, to 989898. You get all the free information and then you make up your mind. I respect your intelligence enough. That's all this is about. JD Vance is Donald Trump's running mate, and he did the circuit yesterday again on the Sunday morning shows. In one day, JD Vance sat for more one-on-one interviews with DC journalists than Tim Walz, his counterpart over on the Democrat Party, has done during the entire campaign. Think about that for a minute. In one day, JD Vance did more one-on-one interviews than Tim Walz has done since the moment he was announced as Kamala Harris's running mate. And his interaction, JD Vance's interaction with Dana Bash was epic. Everyone's still talking about it, and I want you to see why. Here, take a look.
Well, Dana, first of all, what's putting the residents of Springfield at risk, which was a town completely ignored by the American media until Donald Trump and I started surfacing some of these concerns, is that they can't afford housing. They can't afford health care. The schools have been overwhelmed. The hospitals have been overwhelmed. And they're overwhelmed because Kamala Harris allowed 20,000 Haitian migrants to get dropped into a small Ohio town of about 40,000 people. And it's completely overwhelmed the services. Now, you ask, why have I talked about some of the things that I've been talking about? Let me just say this. My constituents have brought approximately a dozen separate concerns to me. 10 of them are verifiable and confirmable, and a couple of them I talk about because my constituents are telling me firsthand that they're seeing these things. So I have two options, Dana. I can ignore them, which is what the American media has done for years to this community, or I can actually talk about what people are telling me. And of course, many of the things that the media says are completely baseless have since been confirmed. For example, I was told, Dana, that by the American media, that it was baseless that migrants were capturing the geese from the local park pond and eating them. And yet there are 911 calls from well before this ever became a viral sensation of people complaining about that exact thing happening. So my attitude is listen to my constituents. Sometimes they're going to say things that people don't like, but they're saying things that people don't like because their town has been overwhelmed, and it's my job to try to fight for them and to protect them. Kamala Harris opened the border, and now these people are suffering. That's what I'm focused on, Dan.
All right, now you saw Dana Bash there. She's literally jumping out of her seat. She can't wait because she knew this was going to be said, and she has all her notes ready. She's prepared for it. It's a gotcha moment, which would have been great during her interview with Tim Walz and Kamala Harris, but we'll get to that in just a moment. As you can see, the entire theme of this interview had to do with Springfield, Ohio. It had to do with the Haitian migrant crisis in that city, debilitating that city. We did a video while I was on vacation last week about this and how JD Vance and Donald Trump have succeeded in finally turning the media's focus on to what was going on in Springfield, Ohio. They didn't care about the residents there. They didn't say anything about the residents, even though we saw the stories, we saw the videos, we saw the city managers, we saw the mayor of the city, we saw residents of the city begging for help. The media ignored it. It wasn't until they thought they had some sort of gotcha moment where they could point the finger and claim racism against JD Vance and Donald Trump that they finally decided to focus on it. But of course, the focus isn't the plight of the people living in Springfield, Ohio, and what they've had to endure. No, the focus is trying to stop Donald Trump and JD Vance and maybe make victims out of the Haitian migrants who were there. All right, so here comes Dana Bash, right? And she's ready to jump on this. Now, take a look at how this exchange goes, because she's trying to make the case that JD Vance is just lying, being racist, and falsely accusing these migrants from horrible things.
Dana, would you like to ask me questions and then
Oh, I'm sorry. This is the very end of the interview. This is how it ended. I apologize. We're going to get back to some of the meats of it, but this was my favorite part of the interview, and I wanted to show you this part first.
Dana, would you like to ask me questions and then let me answer them, or would you like to debate me on these topics? I noticed that when you had Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, you gave them multiple choice answers to the questions that you asked, and you allowed them to answer the questions. I'm happy to be here to talk about policy, but if you're going to interrupt me every single time that I open my mouth, then why am I even doing this? So please ask a question, and I'd ask you to be polite enough to let me answer it.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's how you handle this, and that's how you ended. And that is how it ended. Now, something really interesting happened that I want to break down for you, because you may have seen on social media, or if you were watching CNN, you saw that a Democrat congressman came on next, Ro Khanna, and he claimed that J.D. Vance had told Dana Bash to shut up. Okay, here's Ro Khanna saying that here.
Well, let me start with that Senator Vance interview. Free advice to Senator Vance, telling you to shut up is probably not going to help the gender gap he has. He's got all of Trump's anger without any of Trump's humor or charm, just in terms of presentation. There's a reason he's -15 in his favorabilities. And the sad thing is, look, Springfield, Ohio has real issues. You know what that issue is?
All right. So, and then Dana Bash went on to say something about, he can say whatever he wants about me. But did you catch that? J.D. Vance telling you to shut up probably doesn't help him with his gender gap. I do love when they always point to the gender gap, because the gender gap only occurs when Republicans are underwater when it comes to women voters. Guess what the bigger gender gap is? It's Democrats with male voters. But that doesn't, we never use the term gender gap there, because, that doesn't matter. But here's the narrative. Here's the lie. Ro Khanna saying that J.D. Vance just told Dana Bash to shut up. That doesn't sound right, does it? Would J.D. Vance tell Dana Bash to shut? I mean, he's too disciplined for that, right? He's too controlled. He wouldn't tell her to shut up, would he? Well, of course he wouldn't. And he didn't. Here's the clip in question with captions so you can see exactly what he said. But if you go on social media, if you watch CNN, you're going to see it. You can go ahead and search J.D. Vance tells Dana Bash to shut up, and it's everywhere. I can't believe he did that. Well, good. You shouldn't believe he did it, because he didn't. Here's what he said.
What is the implication when you say you calling out these problems has caused a bomb threat? You accused me of causing a bomb threat. Doesn't that mean you should shut up about the residents of Springfield? Don't you realize you're engaged in basic propaganda to silence the concerns of American citizens?
I was quoting.
All right. So did you see that? Did you see what he actually said? We'll play it one more time. But J.D. Vance says, listen, I come on here, and your question is, you've been talking about what's going on in Springfield, Ohio, and there have been bomb threats. So shouldn't you stop talking about Springfield, Ohio, because you're causing bomb threats, right? This is a typical trick that the left does. Of course, they'll never do it having to do with the assassination attempt against Donald Trump. They'll never say, hey, you guys are saying he's an existential threat to our Constitution and we're never going to have a free election. And now somebody who actually believed that stuff, saying that Donald Trump was a threat to our democracy, just tried to point a gun at him at a golf course. Maybe you should stop saying that about Donald Trump. No, they'll never do that. But they're trying to tell J.D. Vance that he shouldn't talk about Springfield, Ohio, because by doing so, he's causing bomb threats, right? Which, by the way, number one, these are alleged bomb threats. I haven't seen the evidence of the bomb threats. And even if there are bomb threats, you don't know that the bomb threats are caused by people who were triggered by J.D. Vance, who were angry at the Haitian immigrants, or it could be some crazy left-winger who put in the bomb threat to make Republicans look bad. I'm not saying that's what's happening. What I'm saying is you don't have the evidence, Dana Bash, to say that it's J.D. Vance's fault, right? Okay. But go back and look at the words that J.D. Vance said here. J.D. Vance says, you're saying my rhetoric caused bomb threats, but what you're really saying is you, J.D. Vance, you should shut up about Springfield, Ohio. Not you, Dana Bash, should shut up about Springfield, Ohio. He's accusing Dana Bash of telling him to shut up. That's what this clip was.
What is the implication when you say you calling out these problems has caused a bomb threat? You accused me of causing a bomb threat. Doesn't that mean you should shut up about the residents of Springfield?
That doesn't what you're saying mean you should shut up about the residents of Springfield. You, J.D. Vance, should shut up. Aren't you, Dana Bash, basically telling me to shut up about the residents of Springfield. And then here comes Ro Khanna doing his best for the party. Again, I'll remind you what he said immediately after that segment.
Start with that Senator Vance interview. Free advice to Senator Vance. Telling you to shut up is probably not going to help the gender gap he has.
Yeah, you're right. That's why he didn't tell her to shut up, you lying sack. But this is just the beginning of the lies about J.D. Vance in this interview. Here's another one. Sam Stein, who, where does he write for now? He's been with Politico, Huffington. Oh, Bulwark. Oh, that's fantastic. He's been with Huffington Post, Bulwark, every left-wing rag possible. Now he's with Bulwark, MSNBC. All right, so Sam Stein says, J.D. Vance acknowledges the cat and dog stories are urban legends and then rationalizes it. Quote, if I have to create stories so that the American media actually pays attention to the suffering of the American people, then that's what I'm going to do. See, they're accusing him of admitting that he created stories. In other words, they were fiction. I created them. Did he really say that? Well, let's take a quick look.
Dana, the evidence is the firsthand account of my constituents who are telling me that this happened. And by the way, I've been trying to talk about the problems in Springfield for months, and the American media ignored it. There was a congressional hearing just last week of angel moms who lost children because Kamala Harris let criminal migrants into this country who then murdered their children. The American media totally ignored this stuff until Donald Trump and I started talking about cat memes. If I have to,
But it
if
wasn't
I have
just
to
a meme.
create stories so that the American media actually pays attention to the suffering of the American people, then that's what I'm going to do, Dana, because you guys are completely letting Kamala Harris coast.
All right, so that's what he said. You just heard it in context. And I guess the quote is correct from Sam Stein here. And it's not just Sam Stein. This has been repeated by Pete Buttigieg and other Democrats, high-profile Democrat politicians and people in the media. J.D. Vance just admitted that he's creating the stories about the cats and dogs to get attention. Now, this could just be mishearing J.D. Vance and not offering him the benefit of the doubt, which I certainly wouldn't expect anybody in the media to do. And this could just be a one-off. But here's the thing, guys. Dana Bash, in real time, during this interview, actually followed up with J.D. Vance and said, hey, did you just say you're creating these stories? So in this interview, J.D. Vance actually explained. He said, oh, let me explain what I meant there. He explains what he meant when he said create the stories, but no one's paying attention to that. They're just passing around the lie because that's what they do. Here's the moment. Here's the explanation.
You just said that you're creating the story.
What's that, Dana?
You just said that this is a story that you
Yes.
created. So the eating dogs
We
and
are
cats
cre-
thing is
we-
not.
We are
accurate.
creating, Dana, it comes from firsthand accounts from my constituents. I say that we're creating a story, meaning we're creating the American media focusing on it. I didn't create 20,000 illegal migrants coming into Springfield thanks to Kamala Harris's policy.
There you go. So when he says we're creating the story, what he means is we're creating it so that the media focuses on it. Let me be clear here, because I think that what's screwing people up or what's allowing people to leap to this conclusion is the word story. He's using the word story. They're creating the stories. Do you ever watch, the network news or your local news, and they do the whole opening graphics and then they zoom in on the anchor, right? And what does he always say? I'm Chick Brickwell. Our top story tonight. That's what they always say, right? Or at least back in the good old days of network news in the 70s, that was the cliche. What's our top story tonight, Jim? Our top story tonight, well, now, if they're doing a story, does that mean it's fiction? What, it's just a story? You've created a story? No, that's a media term that you use for the top news item, the top story. That's what J.D. Vance is doing here. That's exactly what he meant by that. But the willful lies about him and anything that he says, it's beyond despicable. They know what they're doing, and they know that they're lying. And that's why you know that they know what they're doing. You know exactly what they're doing, and that's why you come here instead of continuing to watch them. The great thing about J.D. Vance, though, is that he was just getting started with Dana Bash. He was also on with Kristen Welker on MSNBC. And it's amazing to me that you just heard him say that there was congressional testimony of mothers whose children have been killed by illegal immigrants. And all these news anchors want to do is talk about cat memes. But the good news is J.D. Vance is great at taking that, parlaying it, and then redirecting the fire back about what's really at play here. Here's Kristen Welker. Meet the press.
Let me just ask you, though, in October of 2016, you said this, quote, Trump makes people I care about afraid, immigrants, Muslims, etc. Because of this, I find him reprehensible. God wants better of us. This week in Springfield, buildings were closed because of bomb threats. Haitian immigrants say they are afraid for their lives. Are you now doing the very thing you once called reprehensible, Senator?
Well, first of all, Kristen, we condemn all acts of violence and all threats of violence. But Kristen, the reason that I changed my mind on Donald Trump is actually perfectly highlighted by what's going on in Springfield, because the media and the Kamala Harris campaign, they've been calling the residents of Springfield racist. They've been lying about them. They've been saying that they make up these reports of migrants eating geese, and they completely ignore the public health disaster that is unfolding in Springfield at this very minute.
Senator,
You know
what
who
about
hasn't
the
ignored
Haitian
it?
immigrants
Donald
who
Trump,
say they're
because
afraid?
Donald Trump believes, Kristen, let me finish this point, Kristen, and feel free to follow up. Donald Trump is the only person who brought Springfield to national attention, and is the only president who's going to fight for the residents, not just their right to live safely in their communities, but for their right to complain about what's going on in their own community. I think it's disgraceful that Kamala Harris has heard these complaints, has decided to call people racist instead of actually trying to make their lives better by undoing her open border. But I know you had a question.
Well, and Senator, again, because we're almost out of time, but Haitian immigrants are saying they're afraid for their lives.
Haitian immigrants are saying they're afraid for their lives. The people of Springfield, Ohio are also saying they're afraid for their lives and their homes and their property and their children. And yes, their pets. But you don't need to care about that. A little bit more, though, with Kristen Welker, because J.D. Vance was just that good.
Look, we also have to talk about, and should primarily talk about, the effects that this has had on car insurance rates, on disease rates. Those are the things that I'm spending 95% of my time talking about, Kristen. But again, the media didn't care about this story until we started sharing the 911 call about the geese. That is an indictment of the American media. But the real problem here, Kristen, let me just finish this point, is Kamala Harris opened the border with no plan for how to assimilate 20,000 people. It's made the community worse off. That's what we should be focused on.
Dude is like a dog with a bone, and he's great, and he stays on message, and he continues to turn it back on the media, which I love, because the media obviously is a major part of the problem here. But let me just make this come full circle for you, because what we're seeing here in all of the lies about Springfield, Ohio, and all of the accusations, the false accusations, I remind you, this entire narrative that you're seeing on the Sunday shows, and we've got one more from Face the Nation, this entire narrative against J.D. Vance happened hours before the assassination attempt of Donald Trump. They're blaming J.D. Vance and Donald Trump for alleged bomb threats in Springfield, Ohio, and they're saying, because you're saying this stuff about Haitian migrants, we're getting bomb threats. But they can't bring themselves to connect the dots on an assassination attempt against Donald Trump and the heated political rhetoric on the other side of the aisle. It's beyond disingenuous. It's just propaganda. But let's be clear here on what's happening, because this can't be said enough. They only care about this story because they think they can use it to hurt them. Otherwise, they wouldn't care. It wouldn't be on the radar. They wouldn't mention it. And the only reason they're mentioning it is because Trump and Vance started with the cat and dog memes. This is why we talked about it last week in one of our videos, because the memes are actually making the difference in this entire storyline. And let me put it in perspective. You know, the old cliche, I'm old enough to remember. Well, you don't have to be too old to remember 8 years ago, when Donald Trump's heated, racist, xenophobic rhetoric about building a wall along our southern border was getting people killed, was making Mexican immigrants unsafe, right? Like she just said, the Haitian immigrants feel unsafe. Well, it was the Mexican immigrants back then, because Trump said that Mexico isn't sending us their best and they're sending us bad, which is true. And Guatemalans and Venezuelans and Hondurans and We're seeing it. We're still seeing it, especially now that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris have opened our border. But 8 years ago, it was beyond the pale, outrageous, unacceptable, racist, xenophobic political rhetoric to suggest that we need to build a wall on our southern border so that we can have regulated immigration without unabashed illegal crossings and catch and release like we saw under the Obama administration. That was 8 years ago. Fast forward to today. And if you're in a swing state, you'll probably see a political ad for Kamala Harris featuring that very wall that Donald Trump built. So 8 years from now, maybe, just maybe, Kristen Welker and Kamala Harris and what's left of Joe Biden and Barack Obama and Dana Bash and all of these journalists who are beating J.D. Vance up right now, maybe it'll take them 8 years to come around and they'll see that they're on the wrong side of history. Let's quickly go to Face the Nation one more time. J.D. Vance, again, doing more interviews in the span of just a few hours than Tim Walz has done the entire campaign. Here's J.D. Vance.
You represent Ohio here in Washington, and your state's governor is asking for federal help to deal with the influx of about 15,000 migrants over the past 4 years, which has strained the health system, he says, schools, caused safety issues. You've been talking about these problems, but what have you done to help Governor DeWine with his request for federal help?
Well, the most important thing that we can do to assist Governor DeWine and the whole state of Ohio, and frankly, the whole country, Margaret, is to stop Kamala Harris's open border. And for 2 years, I've been fighting for policies that do exactly that. You have to ask yourself, why have these 20,000 Haitian migrants been dropped into a small Ohio town in just a few years, Margaret? And the answer is because Kamala Harris implemented what's called temporary protective service for over 100,000 Haitian migrants. She basically, with a magic wand, granted amnesty to thousands of people who shouldn't have been in this country. And now a small Ohio town is dealing with the consequences. And to anybody listening, Margaret, this is what Kamala Harris wants to do to every town in this country. Overwhelm them with migration, stress their municipal budgets, see communicable diseases on the rise. What is happening in Springfield is coming to every town and city in this country. If Kamala Harris's open border policies are allowed to continue, we've got to stop this. American citizens are suffering because of what she's done. And
damn, he's good. And I've shown you 3 different shows now, from Dana Bash to Kristen Welker to Margaret Brennan, is it, on Face the Nation. And did you notice something? Each time, about 45 seconds into the answer, they all kept trying to interrupt him. They all jumped in. How many times did J.D. Vance have to talk over the interviewer, trying to talk over him and interrupt him and derail him, or have to actually say, listen, I know you're trying to get in here. Let me finish my point, and then you can follow up if you'd like. I mean, he's being polite about it, but they're all doing the same thing to him. But that line of questioning from Brennan there on Face the Nation was quintessential Washington, D.C. journalism work there. It was beautiful. Think about this for a minute. Here's the entire narrative. The Biden-Harris administration grants temporary protective status to tens of thousands of Haitian immigrants who did not go through the process of properly and legally entering our country. They come in illegally, but they're granted temporary status. They're then transported from the border to a small, dilapidated town in eastern Ohio. They are straining all the resources of the town. They're living on people's private property. They're getting free handouts from the government that's straining the resources at the city, county, and state level. It's creating an unhealthy environment, not just for the people who are already living in poverty because of the economic policies of this administration, but also for the Haitians themselves, who are dealing with poverty and horrific conditions because there's no homes for them or no places for them to live and no shelters. So they're literally living in tents in city parks or in the front yards and backyards of people's private property. These hell-like conditions have been created by the Biden administration. And when Ms. Brennan finally gets somebody on the air to talk about it, she gets the Republican senator from that state on the air and points her finger at him and says, why the hell haven't you done something to get more money to Ohio so they can deal with this problem? You're the problem, JD Vance. You're at fault because you haven't gotten enough federal tax dollars from Oklahoma and North Dakota and Alaska from those taxpayers to funnel through Washington, D.C. to give to these Haitians living in Springfield, Ohio. What have you been doing to give them more money? Only in Washington, D.C. is the villain, the senator who hasn't gotten enough money and tax dollars for these people. Only in Washington, D.C. media circles do you not bring this guy on and say, Mr. Vance, Senator Vance, I got to ask you, how in the hell did this happen? How are these conditions even created? They have no question about it. They don't care. You know, maybe you should get somebody from the Biden administration on your show. Maybe you should ask Kamala Harris why she has created these conditions in Springfield, Ohio. No. That's boring. That's boring, and that does nothing to harm Donald Trump. So the question is, J.D. Vance, you dirtbag, why don't you get more federal tax dollars for the Haitian immigrants in Springfield, Ohio? That right there is Washington, D.C. media to perfection. I have something to say about this debate. And listen, I know I was on vacation, but I did put in a video last week, and I'm happy. Go back and watch the video, okay? It's right there on this channel, wherever you're watching this. You'll see the video that we did while I was on vacation, but I saw all this mope, and I saw all these Eeyore Republicans saying, oh, that's it. Kamala Harris won the debate. It's over. And I felt like I was one of the only political commentators who were like, that debate, that did not harm Donald Trump. That did not help Kamala Harris. And you've seen the narrative now. In just a way, I hate to say I told you so, but I kind of told you so. You've seen the numbers. You've seen the polls. You've seen the reaction. You've even seen people in the mainstream media saying, yeah, ABC News was awful in this debate. And it didn't actually hurt Donald Trump, as I told you in our video last week. And if anything, it hurt Kamala Harris, because think about it. If you're like the 10 or 11% in this electorate that hasn't made up their mind, and you were tuning into that debate to get new information, well, you learned nothing new about Donald Trump. Everything that you saw from Donald Trump is everything you've known about Donald Trump for the last 8 or 9 years, right? You were there to find out who Kamala Harris was. You were there to find out what her plans were. And if that was the case, well, you walked away without much of anything. Not only did she not answer the questions, but it was full of bromides and platitudes and rehearsed talking points that amounted to nothing. It was all for show. It was all to look presidential. Well, I don't care. You can look as presidential as you want, but if you have no ideas, you're of no use to me at a time where our nation is in crisis. And that's exactly the narrative coming out of that debate last week. But it's even worse for Kamala Harris now, because there is a report, and it's gaining momentum, and there is a sworn affidavit to support it, that the Kamala Harris campaign may have colluded directly with the ABC News Network and with the people who put on that debate, negotiated separately certain terms and conditions in their favor, creating a completely and totally unfair environment during this debate. Let's take a look at this affidavit. This is from an employee of ABC News. The beginning part is the verification that this person is who they say they are, that they reside in New York. They've worked for ABC News for over 10 years, various technical administrative positions. Since the acquisition of ABC News in 1996, I've observed significant transformation in the nature of news reporting in the organization. These changes suggest a shift from unbiased reporting to a model influenced by external factors. This person then goes on to say, I don't endorse Donald Trump in his capacity as a candidate for the president. This affidavit is to address concerns regarding biases within the news reporting with my employer's debate that will be hosted on September 10th, 2024. By the way, this sworn affidavit was, as you can see, dated September 9th. This was the day before the debate. That's a critical piece of evidence here as this story unfolds. All right, so let's move on. Observations on debate communication. Since the debate of President Trump and Vice President Harris has been announced to be broadcast on ABC, various members of staff had expressed hope of a debate where issues that were important to everyday Americans would be discussed, and that had been and there had been promises made that the candidates would be held to firm discussions regarding the proposed policy stances, and that the debate would not deteriorate into an ad campaign, whereas both candidates would simply make blanket statements without specific policy or explanations, and then the next is redacted. But this specifically says, people, my colleagues, my coworkers, we expressed that we really wanted this debate to go in this one direction. Make it about policy, policy, policy. Political position clarification. Many employees of ABC who were looking for a fair and honest debate questioned the clear bias that is well known throughout the company. It's common knowledge that debate moderators, as well as chief executive officers of my employee, are well known not to support Donald Trump. This led to several employees speaking up in regards to how fair the debate was going to be. Listen, if this is true, and again, this person has sworn in this affidavit that it is true, that actually gives me some encouragement that there were some people that said, listen, we're supposed to host a debate. Understand something, if you're confused about all of this. For the last like 20 years, maybe longer, 30 years, networks did not host presidential debates. We had a thing called the Presidential Debate Commission. That's why the set always looked the same. That's why the rules were always the same. The networks got the feed of the debate and they were able to broadcast it, but the networks were not involved in any of the decisions or formatics or the negotiations related to those debates. Okay, that got blown up this year. Both campaigns, the Trump campaign and the Biden campaign, said, yeah, enough with the commission on presidential debates. It was really Trump after last election's debacle 4 years ago that Trump said, enough of this. This is an unfair scheme, and it skews to the left all the time, and I'm not going to participate in that anymore. So now the networks get to negotiate directly. That's why this is significant, because CNN did the last one, and this one was ABC News. It wasn't the bipartisan Presidential Debate Commission handling this. All right. Concerns regarding journalistic integrity. It is my belief that contemporary news organizations, including ABC News, no longer adhere to impartiality. The influence of commercial interests and substantial donors appears to affect news presentation, resulting in selective reporting and biased narratives. Well, I mean, that's like saying the sky is blue and water is wet, right? He also says, or she says, I have personally witnessed news stories being cut from programming and not reported at all due to the influence of certain corporations linked to our parent company. Love to flesh that one out a little bit. All right. Observations pertaining to debate fairness. Number 4. I have noted specific instances related to the debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris that raise concerns about procedural fairness. The specific instances are perceived bias are as follows. And again, this was the day before the debate. Bullet point 1. The Harris campaign received particular accommodations, including but not limited to. Wait, let me pause here for a minute. Let's go back in the time machine. Do you remember like 10 days ago when it was still up in the air whether Kamala Harris was going to agree to this debate? You know, she wanted the mics not to be muted. She wanted to be seated. She wanted to have no card. She was trying to renegotiate all the rules, right? Remember that? And then out of the blue, at the end, the Harris campaign said, okay, fine. We're going to go ahead and do the debate. But there were obviously conversations going on. There were obvious negotiations going on. They were trying to get all this stuff. Doesn't it make you wonder, okay, well, why all of a sudden at the end of the day did she decide to go ahead and do the debate without any concessions? Well, now you have the answer to that. She did get concessions. They were secret concessions. They were behind the scenes concessions, but they made a difference. Let me explain. Bullet point item number 1. The Harris campaign received particular accommodations, including but not limited to the providing of a podium significantly smaller than that used by Donald Trump. Let's pause there for a second, because this is very real. Blow this up for a second, will you? That's the debate stage. The podium on the left is Donald Trump's podium. The podium on the right is Kamala Harris's. Look at the difference there. Now, yeah, that's no big deal, right? Well, what's the big deal? That doesn't matter. This is why Kamala Harris wanted to be sitting down. She wanted to be physically on the same level as Donald Trump. And when you are from the waist up, it takes away a lot of the height advantage that men might have over women, especially a man who is 6 foot plus. To make the camera trick you into thinking they were the same size ABC News agreed to Kamala Harris's demand that a podium be specifically designed for her dimensions. Look at the podiums. You can see it. If she were standing behind that other podium, she'd look like a child, right? So they designed this so that the camera tricks would work in her advantage. All right. That's one. By the way, there's another thing. It's not in the affidavit, but I have a hunch and I'll just throw it out there. Do you notice something about this set that is different from every other presidential debate you have ever seen, whether it was the presidential debates or the primary debates that we saw all through this election cycle and 4 years ago for the Democrats? Do you see what I see? Do you notice how dark the lighting is for this? I noticed this the second I saw the debate. The lighting is incredibly, extraordinarily dark. They often use a blue background, but it's often a light, bright, vibrant blue. And there is light flooding the stage, whether it's like we saw during the nomination process for the Republican candidates this time around, or for the Democrats last time around, or the debate we just had between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. It's a very, very bright setting. This very, very dark lighting. Why? Generally speaking, dark lighting makes you look a little younger, a little more attractive. It's more favorable to women, to be fair, to be honest. I think personally, this may have also been part of the negotiation. I don't know, but knowing stagecraft the way I do, I have a hunch that that's what happened here. All right, let's get back to the affidavit. Podium significantly smaller than that of Donald Trump. Assurances regarding split-screen television views that would favorably impact Kamala Harris's appearance relative to Donald Trump. What does that mean? It means when they went to split screen, they enlarged her side of the screen so that her head looked the same size as his head. In other words, it's a psychological thing, but it's a significant thing that when you're seeing two people talk to each other and they're both trying to win your assurances that they're a strong leader, if one of them is physically looking stronger and bigger and more capable, you're psychologically going to be more inclined to be on that person's side or think that that person is a stronger leader. So it means that during a split screen, they were going to make sure that her head and her shoulders were enlarged so that they look comparable in size. This all happened, and without Donald Trump knowing that this was part of the negotiation. Now, he may not have objected to this, but if you're negotiating something, if Donald Trump is in the room during these negotiations, he can say, okay, fine, you can go ahead and do your thing with the podium and the split screen, but I want A, B, and C. Do this for me. But see, this all happened outside of his purview. These were one-on-one negotiations that Kamala Harris's team allegedly had with ABC News directly. Okay, back to the affidavit. It was, again, and this is probably the most important part, it was agreed that Donald Trump would be subjected to fact-checking during the debate, while Kamala Harris would not face comparable scrutiny. Kamala Harris's people said, okay, we're only going to do this debate if you guys promise to fact-check that guy. Because he lied so much during the CNN debate, and he was never fact-checked, and everyone thinks that he won the debate, and Joe Biden, he did so well against Joe Biden that Joe Biden had to drop out, and we're not going to let that happen this time. So you need to promise to fact-check him. And if you remember the debate, that's exactly what happened. She got no scrutiny. She got no fact-checking, and he got 5 fact-checks, most of which were wrong, actually. One of the fact checks had to do with Kamala Harris's position on abortion, and the fact check was inaccurate. It was wrong. The other fact check had to do with Donald Trump saying that Kamala Harris was in favor of federal funding of transgender procedures for illegal immigrants in prison, and that's actually 100% true. So they even got their fact checks wrong. They lied about the fact checks over there. But more importantly, they only fact checked one side of the debate stage. Let's get back there. This was widely known throughout the company that Donald Trump would be fact-checked. In fact, various people were assigned to fact-checked observations it was perceived candidate Trump would make during the debate. In other words, staff were sent before the debate to go and create fact checks based on what they assumed Donald Trump would say so that they had everything at the ready. In fact, Harris' campaign required assurance that Donald Trump would be fact-checked. This was done via multiple communications with the Harris campaign, whereas the Trump campaign was not included in the negotiations. To my understanding, any rules, negotiations, and conversations pertaining to the debate should have both the Trump and Harris campaign involved. The Harris campaign had numerous more calls regarding the debate rules about the Trump campaign's aware are on the call. All right, more. The Harris campaign was provided with sample questions. This is the blockbuster right here. The Harris campaign was provided with sample questions that, while not the exact questions, covered similar topics that would appear during the debate. If you remember right, at the very beginning of the debate, David Muir, with his head of hair, looked right into the camera and said neither candidate had been briefed in any way whatsoever about the content of the questions that were being asked in the debate. I think it's incumbent on ABC News to be completely, fully, 100% transparent on this. In fact, I think it's incumbent on Disney, a publicly traded company that owns ABC News, to be completely transparent about this. And yet there's been no response. A little bit more. Furthermore, the Harris campaign imposed restrictions on the scope of questioning, including they said you can't ask questions about this, this, and this. No questions regarding the perceived health of President Joe Biden. Think about that for a minute. Was it odd to you that Kamala Harris was never asked about whether she had an accurate understanding of that? Isn't that actually a pretty relevant issue here, that Kamala Harris has been lying to the American people about the status of Joe Biden's health for the last 3.5 years? And there was no question at the debate? Well, that's because she demanded it. Also, no inquiries related to her tenure as Attorney General in San Francisco. You can't ask any questions about her. Didn't they ask Joe Biden, or they brought something up about Donald Trump? Didn't they bring something up about Donald Trump doing the full page ad about the Central Park Five like 30 years ago in New York? But you can't ask about her job as an elected official, as Attorney General of San Francisco? That complete and total hole over on the West Coast. No questions concerning her. I find this fascinating, by the way. Boy, any investigative journalist worth his salt should be prying into this right now. No questions concerning her brother-in-law, Tony West, who faces allegations of embezzling billions of dollars in taxpayer funds and who may be involved in her administration if elected. Good Lord, where's the blockbuster story into that? Internal organizational climate. I have observed a pronounced bias against Donald Trump within ABC News. Well, so have we. That's not freaking. Purpose and documentation of that. This affidavit is executed and documented and provide transparency regarding the issues of fairness and impartiality in the debate process and broader concerns about journalistic integrity at ABC News. The rest is really about the affidavit, how it was signed, how it was executed, how it was delivered, how it was sent. It was notarized on the 9th day of September 2024 with the verification of the affidavit. That's kind of big, isn't it? Have you seen this story much anywhere other than social media and maybe some other YouTubers or Rumblers talking about it? Shouldn't this get a little bit more scrutiny? Shouldn't it? Why would ABC News do that? Why would ABC News jeopardize their pristine journalistic integrity? Can't even say it with a straight face. We know exactly who ABC News is. ABC News is the house that George Stephanopoulos occupies here as their superstar star anchor of Good Morning America and This Week with George Stephanopoulos. He's a Clinton hack. He's a Democrat operative. This is the ABC News that features The View as one of their news programs. Frankly, I think The View is now the perfect representative of what ABC News is as a news brand. How could this possibly happen? And why was Kamala Harris so insistent on ABC News being the place for her debate? Well, maybe because she knew that when she made these demands, she'd have a welcome ear listening to her. Most specifically, Dana Walden, the woman on the left in this picture. She's in charge of ABC News. And it's well documented that she's a longtime friend of Kamala Harris. Don't you think we, the people, deserve to know exactly what involvement Ms. Walden had in these so-called negotiations that happened behind the scenes, one-on-one with the Harris campaign, setting the stage for this debate? I think so. Can I remind you, please, that ABC News is owned by Disney, a publicly traded company with certain fiduciary responsibilities to the public trust? Also, every single ABC News affiliate, ABC network affiliate, every channel that's in your local city right now where you tune in to ABC, those local stations are all under the jurisdiction of FCC guidelines for fairness and the Federal Elections Commission for in-kind contributions to a political campaign. I would think that this would fall under the auspices and umbrella of those federal regulations. But it goes well beyond just the head of ABC News, Kamala Harris's buddy here. It also goes to one of the moderators. This video has been unearthed from the inauguration day. Well, I'll let you listen.
Lindsay Davis, Robin Roberts is right. It's a sorority thing. I don't understand it all. So you have to explain it to everybody. You're a sorority sister of Kamala Harris.
Right. Well, pearls are a symbol of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, which she pledged while she was at Howard University. And the strand of pearls is symbolic of the unity and the sisterhood. Okay. But on this day, there's actually a Facebook page of women who say wear pearls on January 20th, 2021, and hundreds of thousands of women are apparently wearing pearls so
there you go. So that's Lindsay Davis. You can see her. That was her 3.5 years ago. She was doing studio coverage of the inauguration events, and she was brought on by George Stephanopoulos to provide expert analysis of a string of pearls that apparently is related to a sorority that both she and Kamala Harris belong to. You could call them sorority sisters. Now, they weren't both in the same chapter that I'm aware of. It's not like they were roommates or anything, but they definitely had something in common, didn't they? A common bond there in the sisterhood of Alpha Kappa Obnoxious. But beyond all of that, knowing this, how could ABC News, in any kind of good conscience, put her, this woman who was just presented herself 4 years ago as having this affinity for Kamala Harris through her sorority affiliation, how could she then be the one that passes muster internally as the person who should be one of the co-moderators of this debate? Just for the appearance of impropriety, as she gushes about her sorority sister. I mentioned the fact checks, didn't I? I mentioned the 5 fact checks that Donald Trump had to endure, according to this affidavit, unilaterally, singularly, at the demand of the Harris campaign. We will not do this debate. You will not get this ratings. This will not be a platform for your 2 superstars unless you promise to fact check Donald Trump. Yes, Kamala, we'll do whatever you say. We'll do that. It's bad enough that that happened. But what's even worse is that Kamala Harris was not fact-checked. Kamala Harris, multiple times during the debate, invoked Project 2025 and said that Donald Trump was either the author of it, creator of it, or in some way endorsed Project 2025. And Project 2025 was going to be the blueprint for his administration, when that has been vastly debunked at every possible turn. Donald Trump literally had nothing to do with Project 2025. I don't know how many times he has to go out there and disavow 2025 and say he has nothing to do with it. Every single time Kamala Harris brought that up, she was allowed to say it without any correction, without any fact check. She also raised the bloodbath hoax. Donald Trump has promised a bloodbath if he doesn't get elected. Well, we've debunked that from the day it happened. He was talking about a financial bloodbath, a Wall Street bloodbath. It wasn't invoking violence and suggesting that he was calling for violence if he doesn't win the election. But Kamala Harris was allowed to suggest that that was actually a violent bloodbath that he was promising, and she was never corrected. She also repeated the Charlottesville fine people on both sides lie, which has been thoroughly debunked. Even left-wing Snopes, the fact-check website that really is more interested in political agendas than facts, they've even said, no, Donald Trump did not say that neo-Nazis and white nationalists were very fine people. In fact, he specifically said the opposite. He specifically said that neo-Nazis and white nationalists were not very fine people. He said that they should be condemned. But she was allowed to repeat that lie at the debate without being fact-checked. She also repeated the lie that Trump incited a violent mob at the Capitol on January 6th. That's just not true. It's not even a matter of opinion, because there have been multiple investigations into Donald Trump, including a special prosecutor, Jack Smith, who has brought federal charges against Donald Trump, multiple federal charges against Donald Trump in his effort to derail the election and interfere with our constitutional process going forward this November. He had unlimited resources to investigate Donald Trump and any potential crime he may have committed. And guess what crime he never charged Donald Trump with? Incitement. He never charged Donald Trump with incitement on January 6th. But Kamala Harris was able to say on the debate stage that he was guilty, not just charged, guilty of inciting a violent mob. And she was never fact-checked. She also said, speaking of January 6th, that she was at the Capitol when the attack on the building took place. But that's just not true. We've seen the security footage of her leaving the Capitol in the 11 o'clock hour before anyone made it down to the Capitol, let alone inside the Capitol. She was actually at the DNC headquarters when they discovered a pipe bomb outside the building. It was a pipe bomb. But she wasn't at the Capitol. She said she was during the debate, and she was never fact-checked. She also said that police officers died as a result of the January 6th attacks. That's not true. 2 police officers committed suicide. 1 police officer died of a stroke after the events of January 6th, but that stroke had more to do with the tear gas that, ironically and sadly, tragically, the police themselves deployed on the crowds than it had to do with anything related directly to the mob attacks. She was not fact-checked on that. She also claimed that Donald Trump said that he promised that he would be a dictator on day one. Well, that's a hoax. We know the origins of that. It was a tongue-in-cheek joke that he said during a Sean Hannity interview. Sean Hannity said, "They tell us you're going to be a dictator." And Donald Trump jokingly says, "Only on day one. After that, nothing. But on day one, I'm going to do this, this, and this." Obviously, he wasn't serious about being a dictator on the first day of his presidency, but Kamala Harris, on the debate stage, said Donald Trump promised to be a dictator on day one, and she was not fact-checked about that. She also claimed that Donald Trump sent a dog whistle message to protesters on January 6th and to the various factions by saying, "Stand back and stand by." That's a hoax. That was during the last debate. That's been debunked. There was no secret dog whistle message, but she said it. She also claimed that Trump will institute a national abortion ban. She said that on the debate stage. How many times? I wish he wouldn't say this, but how many times has Donald Trump said that he doesn't want to do anything at the federal level and does not intend to do anything at the federal level with regard to an abortion ban? He has been saying it much to the chagrin of pro-life conservatives. She was able to make that claim on the debate stage. And yes, once again, that was not fact-checked. She also even claimed that Donald Trump was going to raise taxes. That's a lie, too. And that was never fact-checked, not by David Muir or by her sorority sister on the debate stage. Now, I laid that list of lies from Kamala Harris during last week's debate out there to show you how biased this debate was, how stacked this debate was, how unfair this debate was, and in light of this affidavit, how completely corrupt this debate was. I pointed out to you so you have the facts because you won't get it anywhere else. But I also pointed out to you to give you hope and to make you excited and to make you ready to charge between now and Election Day. Because given all of that, given all the corruption and all the bias and all the unfairness and the 3-on-1 and behind the scenes chicanery and the promises made behind Donald Trump's back, with all of that, Donald Trump has emerged from that debate frankly, in better position than he did during the debate or before the debate. On every single key issue to the American people, the polls actually show an increase in Donald Trump's favor because Kamala Harris, even with all the chicanery, with all the corruption, with all of the backroom deals, and with all the bias, she's still an empty, vacuous vessel. It doesn't stand for anything except her own advancement politically. And the American people see through it. The American people are done with the politics of yesterday. They're ready to, if I may say, turn the page on that kind of thing. And despite everything you saw, despite all of the attacks on your ideas, your principles, your values, despite 2 violent assassination attempts, Donald Trump is still standing. Donald Trump is still fighting. And you better fight along with him. That's it for today. Thank you so much. It's great to be back. I went a little long, but I thought, I had a lot to say considering I've been on vacation for a little over 2 weeks. Not going to leave you again. We're in this to win it, and we're going to be together every single day. Please tell a friend. Please share this video around town. Great to see all of you, so many of you, joining us live today, and we will be back tomorrow. Really appreciate it. Love you guys. Missed you. Good to be back. My name's Larry O'Connor. Please call me Larry.